Thank you so much for joining me for another video. This is Oyedelelaye, and I appreciate you. During the week, someone sent me feedback. His name is Mr. Ken. He's a teacher of biology, and he's been using my textbook to prepare students for the JAMB exam. So he suggested that in this video, in my videos, I do more question and answer and a brief summary of the notes. So I thank you for the feedback, Mr. Ken, and then I also want to hear from others and let me know what you think about that suggestion. I'll try to implement that in this video and let's see how that works. So we're talking about the eighth topic in the JAMB syllabus, and that is transport system. So in transport system, we'll be looking at the need for transportation, the mammalian circulatory system, plant vascular system, the media, process, and mechanism of transport. So why do organisms need a transport system? It boils down to the concept of surface area to volume ratio. So small organisms usually have what is called a large surface area to volume ratio. As a result of that, materials can move by simple diffusion without the need for complex transport system. But as organisms get bigger, their surface area to volume ratio becomes smaller. So it's an inverse proportional relationship. The smaller the size of the organism, the larger the surface area to volume ratio, and the bigger the size of the organism, the smaller the surface area to volume ratio. So that is why organisms need transport system. Now, in the mammalian circulatory system, the components of the circulatory system include blood vessel, the lymph, and the heart. Now, for the composition of the blood is made up of plasma on one hand and made up of cells on the other hand. So if we look at an image such as this, you will see that the blood is made up of 55% plasma and 45% cellular elements. So if you investigate further, the blood plasma is made up of water, ions, plasma proteins, and other substances that are transported by the blood. Now, what is the role of the water? The water acts as a solvent for carrying other substances. And these ions in the blood, they act as electrolytes. They help to regulate the osmotic concentration of the blood. They also act as pH and also regulate the membrane permeability. Now, for the plasma proteins, there are different types. We have albumin, which plays a role in osmotic balance and also as a pH buffer. You have the fibrinogen, which plays a key role in blood clotting, and you have the immunoglobulins, which plays a role in defense. Now, the substances that are transported by the blood include nutrients such as glucose, fatty acid, and vitamins. You have waste products of metabolism. You have respiratory gases such as oxygen and CO2, and also hormones. Talking about blood cells, we have different types and they carry out different functions. For example, we have the red blood cells, also called erythrocytes. They are responsible for the transportation of oxygen, and they also help to transport carbon dioxide to an extent. But primarily, the hemoglobin that is found in the red blood cell is able to transport oxygen around the entire body of the organism. All right, so now we have the leukocytes, which is also called the white blood cells, and they are of different types, classified based on different criteria. You have the basophils, you have the neutrophils, you have the eosinophils. You also have the monocyte and the lymphocyte. Generally, these white blood cells are responsible for immunity and defense in the body of the organism. And finally, we have the blood platelet, which helps to clot blood during injury. Now, I haven't talked about the blood as one of the components of the circulatory system. Then it is also good to look at the next component of the circulatory system, which is the blood vessel. So for blood vessels, primarily there are three types. Primarily, that is the artery, which carry blood away from the heart at high pressure. And you have the veins, which carry blood towards the heart at low pressure. And you have the capillaries, which are the link between arteries and veins. That's where, that's where arteries and veins usually exchange in different tissues of the organisms. So blood flows in capillary is slow, giving enough time for effective exchange of material that is within the artery and the vein in the tissue. Differences between arteries and veins. This is very common in your exam. You should be able to tell the differences, apart from the fact that arteries carry blood away from the heart and vein carries blood towards the heart. There are also very key differences. For example, an important one is that arteries usually carry oxygenated blood, that's blood rich in oxygen and poor in carbon dioxide, while veins usually carry blood that is rich in carbon dioxide but poor in oxygen. That's called deoxygenated blood. And for these that I mentioned, there are also exceptions, which is the pulmonary artery and pulmonary vein. They do the opposite. So learn the differences and also other key concepts such as what a closed system of blood vessels are, and what these are blood that does not make contact with the tissue cells. So another concept would be the concept of double circulation, and also the concept of pulmonary circulation, the concept of systemic circulation, and the concept of the portal system. I'll quickly give a summary of these various concepts. So, what is the pulmonary circulation? Pulmonary circulation simply means blood flow from the heart to the lung and back to the heart without going to the entire body. Then in systemic circulation, you have the blood that is rich in oxygen that is coming back to the heart, then going to the entire body, and then returning back to the heart as deoxygenated blood. This is what you call the systemic circulation. And finally, I won't say finally, let's look at the heart, which is another component of the circulatory system. So in the heart, you have the auricle and the ventricle to your right, and you also have the auricle and the ventricle to your left. Between the auricle and the ventricle in the right side, it's a valve called the tricuspid valve, and the same here, but here it is called the mitral valve or the bicuspid valve. So basically what happens here is that for a complete circulation, blood moves here into the right auricle, and then it goes to the right ventricle before going through the pulmonary artery to the lung in what you call the pulmonary circulation, remember? And then that same blood is brought back into the left auricle and then to the left ventricle, and then goes to the entire body through the aorta in what you call the systemic circulation. All right, so familiarize yourself with this diagram. We'll consider more questions under that. So for the summary of the circulatory system in the heart, blood moves from the superior vena cava to the right auricle, through the tricuspid valve, and then to the right ventricle, and then it goes through the pulmonary artery to the lungs, and from the lung you have pulmonary vein bringing blood that is rich in oxygen to the left auricle, and it passes through the bicuspid valve, also known as the mitral valve, and then to the left ventricle, and goes to the aorta, to the entire part of the body. So when the action of the heart is in two phases, you have the diastole, which is blood flow into the heart under low pressure. So auricle contract and receive, and the ventricle relax for a systole to occur. And when that happens, blood fills the heart under low pressure. And for the systole, auricles relax and the ventricle contract, and that the chamber of the heart are emptying blood out of the heart. So that's the systolic and diastolic phases of blood flow. Finally, for the component of the mammalian circulatory system is what we call the lymphatic system. It's a collection of special drainage vessels that receive excess tissue fluid. So when this happens, this excess tissue fluid eventually reconnect back to the main circulatory system, and it's usually through another vein called the subclavian vein around the neck region. So that takes whatever has been drained from tissues back into the heart and goes into the circulatory system. This lymphatic system plays a very vital role in immune system, and also in draining excess fluid out of body tissues. All right, so having said that, this is the diagram I gave earlier, and that is the end of the discussion on the mammalian circulatory system. So at this point, I can quickly go through the plant circulatory system overview. So plant circulatory system occurs using the xylem and the phloem. So what the xylem does is that it carries water and minerals from the roots to the entire part of the plant, while the phloem carries food and other nutrients from the stem or from the leaves downward to the entire part of the plant. So this experiment is proving that the xylem is responsible for transporting food. So if you take out a stem and you peeled off the entire bark, such that the xylem is also removed at this point, you will see after hours that there's accumulation, there's a swelling here as a result of accumulation of nutrient that would have been moving downwards. But you will not see the same here. So it shows that the phloem moves downward, taking nutrient to other parts of the plant. And also the concept of transpiration, which is the loss of water from the leaves of the plant. There are also experiments to show that plant actually loses water by transpiration. All right, so let us look at the concept of hypotonic solution, isotonic solution, and hypertonic solution. The first one here, hypotonic solution. So the solution is lower than that of the cell. So in that case, water will move into the higher concentration, which is within the cell. So water would usually move from lower concentration to higher concentration via a membrane. So if the solution is hypotonic, water will move into the cell, which in this case is hypertonic. And what happens? The cell will swell and then burst by a process called lysis. But if that was in in plant cell, the cell, because of the cell wall, the cell only becomes turgid. Now, if you come here to isotonic solution, it simply means that the cell and the environment have equal concentration. Therefore, there will be no net movement of water in and out of the cell. So the cell size remains normal. Then let's look at hypertonic solution. What happens in hypertonic solution? The solution concentration is higher than that of the cell. Remember, water will move from lower concentration to higher concentration. So if the solution here is greater than that of the cell, water will move from the cell into the environment. So when that happens in animal cell, the process is called crenation, because the cell will shrink. But the difference is, there's a difference in plant cell. Because of the cell wall again, water would move, it will pull the cytoplasm apart in a way that it shrinks the cytoplasm. But because of the cell wall again, you don't have that kind of shrinkage that you have in the animal cell. So this is called plasmolysis. So on this note, there are experiments to consider that validate transpiration, that shows that water is giving off. There are experiments to validate osmosis. There are experiments to validate plasmolysis and so on. So now let's consider a few questions. One question on the need for transport. Question number 1. In 1998, the unicellular organisms transport essential nutrients directly to all parts of their body by the process of diffusion because they have a large surface area to volume ratio, and that is option B. The next question I will consider will be question number 4 here, 1984, question 37. Normally, the flow of blood is never from, so in the flow of blood, you are moving from artery, right? And artery divide further into smaller arterioles, all right? So you have arterioles, and then you are moving from there to capillaries. And from capillaries, you have venules, which are smaller veins. And from venules, you have veins. And then the blood moves back to the heart. So you have artery, arterioles, capillaries, venules, vein, and back to the heart. So in which way is not possible? Artery to arteriole is right. Arterioles to capillary is very right. Capillaries to venous is very correct. Then you have arterioles to capillaries. That is not possible. So the answer is D. Then question number 5. Blood circulation in a mammal is said to be double because, so double circulation again, it passes through the heart. It passes twice through the heart in a complete circle. So you have number 1, the pulmonary circulation, and you have the systemic circulation. So the right answer here is A. Question 14. Which of the following describe the sequence of blood flow from the heart to the tissue? You have the heart, the artery, the arteriole, and the tissue. And that's the right answer. Question number 14. The right answer is option A. And another question, the primary structure responsible for pumping blood for circulation through the mammalian circulatory system is now it is the heart, right? But what part of the heart? So in the systemic circulation, blood is pumped from the left ventricle to the entire part of the body? And the answer to that question is option C. Let's consider question under plant vascular system. And this question is popping up very fast. Question number 20. Salt and water are absorbed in the root and transported to the leaves by what process? So salt moves by the osmosis through the xylem vessel. So when you are dealing with movement of solutes, the process is osmosis, and of course the vessel responsible for that is the xylem tissue. So the other answer, this other answer could not have been possible, B and C, because you have the phloem, which is meant to transport from the leaves to other part of the plant. And because you are dealing with solutes, this option A is not also possible. So the right answer there is D. I take another question on the media process and mechanism. Maybe I should consider question 23. All right. So question number 23. Which of the following sequence represent the process of blood clotting? All right, so it listed out different things here. So you should also familiarize yourself with the entire process of blood clotting. So you have fibrin, forms a network of thread, red blood cells are caught up and a clot is formed. Fibrinogen in plasma changes into soluble fibrin and blood is exposed to air. Of course, the first thing here will be blood is exposed to air first and foremost. So that is number 4. So let's look at where number 4 is beginning in the option. You have A and B, right? So let's look at, this is a layman's way now. Let's say you have not even come across this before. So determined that it's between A and B. Now let us see what other thing that justifies B as the answer, because I've already seen that the answer is B. So blood clotting begins with the exposure of blood to air from a cut and ends with the trapping of red blood cells, which is the formation of the clot. So here you see red blood cells are cut up and a clot is formed. So the answer there becomes very clear to be B. And finally, I'll consider a random question under the miscellaneous. Yes, I'll consider question number 43 to end this video. So serum differs from blood plasma. This is a very important question. What is the difference between blood plasma and blood serum? It's a very important question you should pay attention to. So here, blood serum is the fluid that is expressed from clotted blood. So when you have a blood clot that is formed, the fluid that comes up when you have injury after blood clot has been formed is called the serum. All right. So it can be defined as plasma that is deprived of fibrin. So it is deprived of the blood protein that is responsible for blood clot. Okay, but it contains other blood plasma components. So the right answer to that question then would be the lack of blood protein fibrinogen, which plays a key role in blood clotting. So that's just the difference between serum and blood plasma. They are almost the same thing, except that serum lacks blood protein called fibrinogen. So I've really spent a lot of time on this video, and I just want to have this video in one piece. Thank you for staying with me up to this time. In the next video, we'll go on to the next topic. I want to get your comments, your feedback, and also like and share this video. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now. See you later.